Hey everyone, let's take a look today at Dead by Daylight's 10th year update. We've got a brand new killer with Jason or the Slasher, a new set of survivor perks, and a whole bunch of quality of life changes too. Let's get into it. Let's first talk Jason. I'm honestly really happy with him, and whilst I do think it's a shame we aren't getting a survivor or a map to go along with him, this does feel colossal. Jason has been the missing piece to DBD's Horror Hall of Fame for 10 years, and now he's here and it feels perfect for DBD's 10th year anniversary, as it's also sort of the character or series that inspired DBD's style and gameplay in the first place. Trapper himself is of course inspired by Jason's design, and the shack is likely inspired also by Jason's shack. And even in the game files, survivors are referred to as campers, a reference to the films as well. So Jason finally being in the game is kind of a big deal, and it feels so fitting for the game's 10th year anniversary. Hardcore horror and a huge icon to round out an insane 10-year run. Jason's gameplay as well is really great, and I do think a lot of fun, and one of the biggest praises I've seen so far across the board is that people think it's really Jason. It really has that Jason feel, which is amazing. That's the core thing to nail when bringing in a licensed character, I think, is to make sure they feel like the character. In Jason's case, that's absolutely the case. He feels imposing and deadly and has so many cool ideas behind his mechanics and gameplay, especially with his mini-moris. My favourite mechanic of all of them is definitely the spear where you can pin people into walls. That's like the coolest thing ever. Jason's power has two core mechanics. He has stealth, where he's able to go invisible and approach pallets, windows or walls and appear at them, jump scaring any survivors nearby, which also gives him a speed boost and killer instinct. He also has some tracking whilst invisible, with him seeing red footsteps on the ground when survivors are moving, and a red mist in place of survivors when they are stationary. He further has throwing spikes which can be collected from hooks or spike piles around the map. The hook spikes pierce into the survivor and reveal their aura and cause them to be broken, stopping them from healing. The spikes from piles will push survivors back and actually nail them to objects if one is near enough, which is crazy, and such a fun mechanic in my opinion. Doing this also lets you grab the survivor off of what they're pinned to and bring them up to your shoulder. This is a really cool power, and I'm anticipating there to be quite a bit of depth with it honestly, and also quite a large learning curve and skill ceiling, seeing as these spikes are like sniper javelins that can be thrown a very long distance and damage. The cross maps with this are going to be insane. Jason is going to be quite a powerful range killer with these spikes, especially with them being so readily accessible. He's also got his stealth, which is quite formidable, allowing him to go invisible but also reappear and also do a break action as he does it. If he spawns in at a dropped pallet, he breaks the pallet and then spawns in. He's arguably even more deadly on non-broken pallets though, which he can also appear at. So he's got great map traversal and stealth, but then also a very strong chase, anti-loop, and range power, which will make him very formidable. It's obviously very early days, I'm not going to claim he's like the best killer ever or whatever, but from this he does seem fairly solidly somewhere in the A tier to me, once you've learned him and once you've sort of gotten good with the spears, because the spears have like crazy potential if you can aim these things well. It's going to be a bit like Huntress, sort of easy entry but a very high skill ceiling, which feels fitting as well. It feels like he deserves to be a good killer, so I do actually hope he ends up as a fairly strong one. Jason of course also got 3 perks, and they've all got a sort of 13 theme, which is quite cool. The first is called Hex Scared to Death. This perk activates after hooking 3 different survivors, igniting the totem. When you chase a survivor, if you break a pallet, all survivors within 13 meters scream and gain 13% hindered for 3 seconds. This is honestly fairly substantial. 13% hindered is nothing to be sneered at, and is quite a considerable decrease. However, and the big however here, is that from actually playing with this, it didn't really seem to actually activate all that often, and realistically did very little unfortunately. I think a big restriction here too is that it's only basic breaks, which means you can't activate this with Bubba's chainsaw or something, say, making it far weaker and a lot more niche I think. Also, the hooking 3 different people condition, it's kind of just a bit odd, because sometimes this is only going to happen far later into the game. It feels like it's just a bit too inconsistent in my opinion, and needs maybe a bit of a simpler activation, but that's just me. The second perk is called Silent Shadow and causes you to start the trial with undetectable for 13 seconds, or until you down a survivor, which seems unlikely so quickly to be fair, but hey. When all gens are completed, you gain undetectable permanently. This feels like it's going to be a real game changer for endgame builds, which is awesome. Imagine how scary this is going to be with undetectable and no-ed both up, like damn. The endgame is going to be a whole new trial. In fact, we actually tested this yesterday as a group and I screamed like crazy. The endgame is going to be a whole new trial, and there's going to be some really fun builds with this, I think. The Undetectable at the start of the match I'm not so sure about. I do think it'll be a fun pairing with Lethal Pursuer, but at the same time, I'm not sure how much value you're going to get, really. It's quite dependent on the killer, I think, and in some ways it maybe feels a bit unhealthy as it further buffs the stronger characters, like Blight, say, who can actually get places quickly. But I couldn't see this being too valuable to many of the weaker ones, like what is Trapper meant to do with this? But hey, it's not a big deal. I do like the idea at its core, and I think the biggest draw of this anyway is the endgame section, so again, it's not like that matters too much. Jason's final perk is called Rampage, and gives him a token each time he breaks a pallet or a wall with a basic action up to a total of 13. Whenever you get blinded or pallet stunned, you gain 1% haste for each token for the next 13 seconds. This having a 20-second cooldown. This is another fire up type of perk where you have to build it up throughout the match, and it's one that'll be so deadly against people who love their beamers. If you just feed them with blinds, then you can give yourself some crazy speed with this. The only downside to this, I'd say, is that you charge it with basic breaks, which likely will take quite a while, and obviously to gain this perk's full potential, it will need a lot of input. However, if you can get to 13 stacks and get a 13% speed boost every time you're stunned or blinded, that's going to be insane, especially as it lasts 13 seconds, which is nothing to be sneered at. That's a sizable amount of time for a speed boost this large. This perk is one of those only time will tell ones though, as it's definitely too early days to call it in my opinion. It's just so dependent on various factors. But at the moment it does seem kinda weak. So that's the perks. I really love how interesting they are, and they also seem super fun, which is nice. It's always nice when perks are fun and take that approach. I think behavior over the last few releases have definitely locked in when it comes to perks, and had some really interesting ideas with them, so I was happy to see these ones. Alright, well before we move on to the Survivor perks, I also want to briefly talk about Jason's lore. Jason's lore is super cool. He's actually like semi-original, with the Jason we have in DBD actually coming from Greenville, which is the realm that Unknown and Sable belong to. Jason's lore actually centers around not like anything from the films, but instead he encounters Unknown, fights it. They neither of them really win, to be fair. Jason seems to be winning overall, but then Unknown scuttles away, Jason follows it, and he ends up leading him into a fog. So that's sort of how Jason comes to the realm, and it's kind of crazy. Like the entire lore is basically just the two of them fighting. It's just a big fight sequence, which is kind of funny, but really awesome as well, and I was not expecting this at all, so I kind of love how this is like a semi-original version of the character. And also I would love if they just did this more with licensed characters, you know, they had them blend into DBD's world more. I think that'd be so cool. So I really love how they've done this, and I'm actually very pleasantly surprised personally, so this is great. The other thing we got in this PTB was a set of 3 perks which will belong to an upcoming Unknown Survivor, which is something to be excited about and does definitely make up somewhat for the lack of Survivor on map with Jason. Although I don't know when this Survivor is coming out, to be fair. My assumption is it's probably going to be in July, because for the past few years they've been releasing a July Survivor, so, you know, a solo Survivor just after the anniversary, so that's my assumption. I'm assuming they're putting these perks in the PTB because they want to test them first, because a few of them are kind of like a little OP, so maybe it's like a testing phase type of thing. I'm not overly sure, but that's my assumption. Wide Open Throttle is the first and gives you 15% haste for 3 seconds after vaulting a pallet, also resetting the pallet back up in the process, deactivating the perk for 60 seconds. This isn't an exhaustion perk, so yes, you can actually pair it up with perks like Life. This is kind of like a half utility, half exhaustion type perk, where you get a speed boost, albeit a 35% lower speed boost compared to most exhaustion perks, and then also a utility ability, with it resetting the pallet. This seems maybe slightly crazy, especially as you can use this around god pallets like Shaq. There is a downside to resetting the pallet, which is that it gets blocked for 60 seconds, but even so, this is so powerful with it being returned to gameplay if not broken. This could be kind of insane, and sort of gears killers toward having to break everything, or else they suffer. So I'm not too sure about this one, but it could be one of those perks that sounds super overpowered, and in reality, it's not that good. It only has like niche applications. But yeah, it's a little hard to tell for now. It sounds quite scary in the PTB, but then so have so many other recent perks like 5 moves ahead, say, yet upon coming to live, they're nothing insane, but definitely good. We'll have to see is what I'm going to say, but I do like the sound of it. Game-changing perks is what we need, I think, after all. Fresh new perks that will shake up the meta and bring in new ideas and mechanics. So this seems really interesting for sure. Lend a Hand is the second perk and lets you simply give a survivor a permanent 4 charges of heal after you've either broken or cleansed a totem, 4 charges being a quarter of a standard heal. This means once per trial, each player can knock off a quarter of the required healing permanently, much like a perk like Fast Track can permanently do this to generators. I do love this idea as a mechanic, but it is admittedly also kind of terrifying, especially if you get a full team to do this. They're all going to be healing a quarter faster, which is 25%. That's not small. It does require the setup of a totem break or a boon set, but you could easily all run Circle of Healing to say and make the heals even faster and activate this secondary ability. Unfortunately, it doesn't work in the way that you're allowed to give one survivor all of the charges, as the maximum is just 1, so you can't give a survivor like a permanent 75% heal. It just doesn't let you, which makes sense, and I'm honestly really glad they did this, because otherwise, like, the healing would be mad, be completely insane. Again though, this is another one where it does sound super overblown at the moment, but in practice it's actually just quite mid and not such a big deal. So it will be interesting to see what happens for sure down the line, but I think, at least from what I've seen on the PTB, this does not seem that powerful. The final perk is called Cross-Examination. Whilst in the killer's terror radius, you see light marks trailing behind the killer, lasting 10 seconds. If you step on these, you gain Elusive, with this ending 5 seconds after leaving the marks. Elusive being the fairly new status effect which provides you with suppression to just about every tracking element, removing your grunts of pain, your scratch marks, blood, and aura from being revealed. This perk seems more on the quirky side and definitely the weakest of the 3, but could be used potentially for close quarters evasion and could actually be quite decent on indoor maps with lots of corners and also against killers who have a large terror radius, as you could feasibly just follow along the markings and stay hidden this way, as long as you stay out of sight. I think it's probably going to not be very good, and likely be more of a quirky, fun build type perk, but hey, I also love that, so I'm not complaining at all. It seems quirky and fun, so I'll happily receive it. We also got some quality of life in this update with some expansion into the aura customization, with there being new aura types to customize for a whole list of different things, which is nice. I personally tend to just keep these largely the same, but this is huge for accessibility and also just feels like, yeah, we should have this as a feature, so this is great. The other quality of life thing was that you can now see the killer's power description when pressing tab, with it being in a simplified form in comparison to the usual much larger wall of text. This lets you be able to read it in game and ideally understand it with just a basic breakdown. This of course only shows up though once the killer is known to the team, which happens once someone enters a chase or loses a health state. Overall, I'm really satisfied with this update. I've seen a few complaints that people want more balance changes. However, I personally find it's probably a better route to not be doing these during big drops like this. I want to focus on the killer release personally. We've had some situations in the past where there's been balance changes releasing alongside killers, and it's ended up that the balance changes get more attention than the killer themselves. So I like them doing it this way. Focus on the new release, have the excitement there. We can do the balance changes in the mid-chapter. Also, this should make the mid-chapter hopefully more exciting and hopefully have more balance changes. Fingers crossed. We'll have to see. If that's not the case, then maybe this is a bit less exciting, but I'm hoping. Finally, there's a bunch of bug fixes too, which is nice. So yeah, that's it. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know your thoughts as always down below. Thanks, and goodbye.